Hello and welcome back to this video series where we're looking at building an e-commerce platform over 25 days using Next, Netlify, and Stripe. So this is going to be another styling video. So we're gonna work through styling our shopping cart. So again, feel free to skip this one if you're not interested in styling. Hopefully we won't need to make any structural changes. We're just going to make things look pretty. Okay, so let's talk through what I am expecting here. I want to draw a little shopping cart icon here, and when I click that shopping cart icon in the navbar, I'm expecting it to pop out an overlay thing that shows all of the different items that we have in our cart, because at the moment in our UI there's no way to actually see what's in our cart other than opening up our console and looking at the thing that we've printed out. Okay, cool. So let's start by getting us an icon. So I'm going to install a package called React Icons. It's an awesome library, has lots of free icons that we can use. So these are the different icon libraries. And then if we search for a particular thing, so I'm going to search for cart, we can look through a whole bunch of different little shopping carts and choose which one we like the most. I like the simplicity of this FI one, so I think FI would be feather icons. Yeah, so let's start off by installing React Icons. And then I'm going to start my dev server again. Then it looks like we can just import icon name from React Icons /FI, so that's going to be feather icons. And I'm going to want this to appear up in the navbar. So I'm going to open up our navbar. I'm going to import, and then if we come back here, I'm going to copy this. So import icon name from React Icons. And then we need to grab our actual icon name. So if we come back here, I might just search for cart again. An FI shopping cart is going to be the name of our icon. And now I can just render that like a regular React component down here. So I can say FI, what was it? Shopping cart. And if I head back to our application, I should see a little shopping cart drawn there. So I want to push this all the way to the right over here. So its parent is the nav container. So on the nav container, I'm going to make this display flex. So it's going to take up the entire width of its container. And then I need to tell it how I want it to distribute the additional space. So if I say justify content, that is the horizontal space. So we want to say with any additional space on the horizontal axis, we want Flexbox to spread that out in between the elements. And so that should push our shopping cart to the end, which it has. Awesome. So I might want to give this a little bit of margin. So I might want it to draw a little bit to the left here. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a new style component for our shopping cart. I'm going to pass it that FI shopping cart. And then I'm just going to put some margin right 1 rem. And then if we go back here, it has not done anything, and that's because I haven't actually told it to render our style component. So I'm going to paste that here and then head back, and there we go. It's drawn in a little bit. That's good. It doesn't have any kind of hover, like the cursor doesn't change to a little hand showing you that you can click something here. So I'm just going to add that in our style component. I'm going to give it a hover state. And I'm just going to set the cursor to pointer. Now that looks much better. And now when we click this, we want to open up our cart. But for now we don't have a cart, so let's just print out to the console that we're doing something. So when we click our shopping cart, we want to call the function handle click, which we're going to declare up here. So handle click is just going to console log open cart. And now when we go and click our button, we don't see anything, but if we open up our console, we've got open cart, and I've clicked that 4 times. And as I click that, that number's going to go up. Awesome. So that's working correctly. So the next thing we want to do is render our actual cart panel. And so this is going to be kind of like an overlay that's going to sit over the top of everything else. So let's start by creating a new component. Okay, cool. So we've got a cart component, and this just renders out a div with a paragraph in it saying, I am a cart. It's very sure of itself, which is good. It knows that it's a cart. Okay, so now we need to actually render it. So because this is going to be an overlay that's sitting over the top of our app, and we're going to want it on every single page, like if we go to our details page, we want to still be able to click this and open up our cart. So if it's going to appear on every single page, we probably want it up in our underscore app.js file. So I'm going to import our cart. Then I'm going to render it down here. We could render it outside of our container because it's just going to kind of sit over the top of everything. But if we scroll up, our container has a bit of default styling on it. So it's setting our font families and our default color. So we probably want it to be inside our container. Okay, cool. And now if we head back to our application, we should see I am a cart drawn at the bottom. Okay, this is drawing at the bottom because it's just in the regular flow of the document. So it's going to lay out all of our different bits, and then it gets to our cart and it's just going to place that at the end. But we want this to show up over the top of the rest of the content. And so we could use position absolute, which we used in a previous video, and that's going to look up its ancestor tree until it finds something that has position relative. And if it doesn't find anything, then it's just going to draw to the body, which is this outermost component. But in this video, we're going to learn about position fixed. And so position fixed doesn't need to find an ancestor with position relative on it. It just draws relative to the window itself. So if we were to draw it over to the right here, and it was to take up like 300 pixels or something like that, and 100% of the height, then as the user scrolls, it's going to stay in that position because it's relative to the entire viewport rather than any element. Okay, so let's do that. So back in our cart component, we are going to create a new style component. Then going to render that instead of our plain old div. And then for our styles, we're going to say position fixed. So that's going to fix it to the viewport. We're going to say top 0, bottom 0, and right 0. And we're also going to give it a height of 100 viewport height. So this is going to be 100% of the viewport. And then we're just going to give it a background color of white. Okay, cool. So there it is there. We're seeing it on the right here. And it's not pushing over any of our other content. It's kind of just drawing over the top. So let's give it a little bit more width. Okay, 400 pixels might be a little bit much, so let's say 300 pixels. Okay, that's looking much better. So now we can't really tell what's our navbar and what is our cart at the moment because they're both white and they're kind of just blending into each other. So let's add a little bit of box shadow to give this some definition. And just like all normal people, I haven't memorized good-looking box shadows. So I'm just going to Google nice box shadow, which you see I have Googled many times before. And this one's purple because I like to go to this one a lot. And if we scroll down, we can see a whole bunch of different examples of box shadows. I quite like this one. So I'm going to click to copy, come back to our style component and drop that in there. Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry, a good box shadow is RGBA 100, 101, 11, 0.20, 7, 29, 0. I mean, who doesn't know that? And now if we head back to our application, we see a little bit of definition there. So we can see that this is an overlay that's coming over the top of our other elements. So then the next thing that I want is a little X that we can draw over in this corner, which we can click to close our cart. So I'm going to head back over to React icons, and I'm just going to click on feather, so it's just feather icon, so it's going to match, and then, I don't know, I'm going to do FIX, look at that, we've got X's in circles, in squares, we probably just want this X on its own. So again, we can import that from React icons. And then we can render that. And there it is. It's a little bit small, so I might increase its size there. So I'm going to create another style components for our X component. And I'm going to set its font size to 2rem. And I'm going to render our style component instead of the normal icon. And that's looking good, maybe a little bit bigger. 3 rem. Excellent. Okay. And now we want it to draw over to the right here. So I'm going to wrap it in a container that takes up the full width and then push it all the way to the end, just so that it also allocates space for this whole section. So any other elements that we draw come underneath it. And so we're going to go display flex. And again, we can justify content to control the horizontal spacing. And we're just going to push everything to the flex end. Okay, so now when I click this, firstly, I might want to give it a little bit of a hover state so I know that I can click it. And then on click, we are going to console log some stuff out. Okay, and now if we head back here and click a few times, open our console, we should see close cart. Okay, awesome. So our button is working. So let's render out a heading here, just saying that we're inside the cart, and then maybe a list of the different items that we currently have in our cart. And I need to create a style component for content. And I'm just going to give that some padding of 2 rem, just to give it a bit of space. Okay, that looks good. Might have a bit too much padding on the top. So I might say 1 rem space 2 rem. Cool, and now I might want this a little bit bigger and maybe not quite as bold. So again, I'll create a new style component for title. Okay, that's looking a bit better and maybe a little bit less bold. So font weight, let's say 400. Okay, that looks much better. Actually, maybe that is a little bit big. Let's say 2.5 rem. I know, picky. Or maybe 2 rem. Nah, it's too small. All right, 2.5 rem. And then underneath it, we're just going to list out the things that are currently in our cart. And so in order to do that, we can bring in our cart by using our hook. And then calling useCart in our component. And remember, that's going to give us back our cart. And remember, our cart is an array. So after our title, we can say cart.map. So iterate over each item in our cart. And then we want to return maybe an li with our, I guess we only have an item ID and an item quantity at the moment. So that might be something we need to fix up in a sec. So because we're doing list items here, we need to wrap this in an unordered list. Okay, cool. So we're going to render out our title, and then we're going to open our unordered list, and then we're going to iterate over all of the items in our cart and render out a list item for them. And then we have our closing UL. And that looks like it's rendering out correctly. But remember, we only have an ID and a quantity being saved in our cart at the moment. So maybe we want to change the structure of our application a little bit. So when we add an item to the cart, it adds a full product. So anywhere in our application, we can access the product name, the price, and much more useful stuff than just an ID. So in order to do that, we're going to head over to our context cart. Remember, this is where all our cart logic and persistence and stuff is happening. So if we scroll down to our add item to cart function, so this takes in an ID and a quantity, and then it adds it to the cart. So here, instead of passing in an ID, what if we pass in a full product? What else would break? So then we are iterating over all of the items in the cart. And for each item, we're checking whether the item.id is equal to ID. So here, this would need to be product.id. And then we're checking, so that's going to give us back an item or null. So then we're checking if we have an item, set its quantity to add the quantity that we've passed in, and then update the cart. Otherwise, here where we're passing in ID, we probably want to spread our entire product in. And then we just add the quantity to that. Awesome. So that should be all good for our add. We've then got remove item from cart. So that takes in an ID, and then it filters based on that ID. So that should be all good. Okay, cool. So that should be all we need to change to add a full product to our cart. So then we need to find anywhere where this function is being called. So if we do add item to cart, so this is the file we're currently in, and then this one is where we're calling it in index.js. So here we're adding an item to the cart. So rather than being product.id, if we get rid of the .id on here, we can pass in a full product. And then I don't think we call it again in this file. Okay, cool. So that should be it. So now if we head back to our application and refresh, and then if we try and add a basketball hoop, and we scroll down here, we see an array. Yeah, so we've only got IDs and quantities in there at the moment. So we probably want to clear out our local storage. So if you come over here to storage and then down to local storage, and we click on here, and then we've got this part, let's just delete cart from here. Now, if we refresh and go back to our console, we should have an empty array, which is good. And then as we add items to the cart, so if we add these two, if we look back in here, we have, cool, we have a full object. So it's got our description, our ID, our name, our price, quantity, slug. Okay, awesome. So we have much more information to make our cart component look a little bit nicer. So let's head back to our cart. And rather than printing out the item ID, we're going to print out the item.name. Okay, that looks good. So let's also add our quantity and our price. So I might just do this to give us a little bit more space. And then we're going to have this li. And maybe we'll put this name in a span. And then we'll have another span for our item dot quantity, and another span for our item dot price. Okay, that looks not great. So let's format our price a little bit and put a $sign and then divide our cents by 100 to get dollars. And then let's get rid of this little dot to the left of this. So we can make our li a style component for item. And we can set the list style to none, which should get rid of those dots for us. Okay, cool. And it looks like there's a little bit of weird space on the left there. So if we open up our inspector and check what's doing that, it's the UL. So the UL has some default styling on it. So if we make our UL a style component, we could just make it capital UL. And then up here, we can say const UL equals. And we're just going to set the padding of this to 0. Okay, cool. So maybe I will move the quantity to this side and just say like 1x basketball hoop, and then move the price to the right here. So it'll be like 1 times basketball hoop, $260. 1 times MacBook Pro, however much that is. So to do that, I'm going to change the structure a little bit here. So I'm going to take our quantity, I'm going to put that inside this span, put an X and a space there. So it'll say like 1X and then that name, and get rid of that second span. And now on our item, I could set this to be a flexbox and determine how much I want for each of these spans to take up. And again, I'm just going to say justify content space between. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I might just add a nice little underline here, and then maybe a little underline under each of these items just to separate things out visually a little bit. And so on this heading, this title, I want a border bottom of 1 pixel solid, and then I want a pretty light gray. So I'm going to say AF, AF, AF and see what that looks like. Okay, that's probably still a bit too much. What if we change these A's to E's? So EF, EF, EF. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice and subtle. And then let's add something like that under each item as well. And maybe just a little bit of space. So maybe just a margin bottom underneath this of, let's just say 0.25 rem. Okay, that's looking much better. So now I might just add a total down the bottom here, and then a buy button. So after our UL, I'm going to add a total, and that's going to have a span for the text total, and then a span for the actual calculated amount. So I'm just going to say $500 for now. We'll work that out in a second. We're doing styling, we're not doing maths. So now we need to declare our style component for total. Awesome, and that's looking pretty good. Let's make it bold, and maybe just a little bit bigger. Well, that's maybe a bit too big, 1.5. Okay, awesome, and now let's just add a button to buy. Now buttons have a bit of default styling on them that looks pretty gross, so let's get rid of some of that. So we are going to say background transparent, font size 100%, color inherit, outline none, and border none. Okay, cool. So now I want to set the actual color of that checkout button to be somewhere in the middle of our gradient. So again, I'm going to go grab our little eyedropper here, and I'm going to grab one of those. And then I'm going to set that as the background color. And I'm going to make the width of our button 100%. And I'm going to give it a bit of padding. Maybe even a little bit more padding. I'm going to change the text to be white. And I'm going to make the font size a little bit bigger. So up here I've done font size 100%. Let's make that 2 rem. Okay, awesome. And maybe we'll bump that padding down just a little bit now that we have a nice big button. Actually, maybe we'll even use the gradient that we have over the whole page for our button. So let's go back up to our app.js file, grab that gradient, and put it here. Okay, that looks pretty cool. And the last thing is a hover state. So again, we've lost our hover state here. Okay, awesome. That's looking very good. So now we need to implement the actual show and hide of this. So when we click this X, it should hide. And when we click the shopping cart that we can't actually see, it should open. So again, it sounds like we're going to need some global state because a lot of components should be able to open and close this little cart panel. So since we already have all of our information about our cart sitting in context, why don't we just extend this file with another variable to determine whether we should open or close our cart. So we're going to say is open and then set is open. And that's equal to use state. And the default value we're going to set for that is false. So by default, our cart will be closed. And then maybe we'll just declare a couple of functions to open and close it. So we could say const open cart, which is just going to set is open to true. And then close cart is going to do the opposite. Cool, and now to expose these functions through our provider, we just need to add it to this exposed object here. And we also probably want to know whether the cart is currently open. Okay, cool, and now in our cart component, where we're bringing in our cart from that use cart hook, we can just add is open to here, and open cart, and close cart. And so now here, where we're saying close cart, we can just call the function close cart, which is going to magically do that for us. And then since we're using styled components, we can actually pass props to our styled components. So we can pass our isOpen value through to our styled component as a prop. And then up here, so this is going to move our component along the x-axis. And so if we were to make this 100%, you can see that our cart is gone. And if we were to make this 50%, then we'll only see half of our cart. So if this is at 0, we see our whole cart. Okay, so if the isOpenProp is passed in, then we want this to be 0 so we can see it. And if the isOpenProp is set to false, then we want this to be 100%, so it draws off the screen and we no longer see it. So because we're inside these backticks, and this is JavaScript land, we can use string interpolation. So we can do this $ bracket bracket to run some JavaScript. And then inside here, we can declare an arrow function, which style components is just going to magically wire up for us and pass in the props. And then we can use a ternary. So we can say props is open. And then what a ternary is like an if statement all in one line. So we can say, if this is true, then I want to return, this value. And then we use the colon to say if it's false, we want to return this value. And so the value that we want to return if isOpen is true is just 0. And the value that we want it to return if it's false is 100%. So our default value for isOpen was false, so this looks right. So let's wire up our shopping cart so when we click it, it calls that openCart function. So remember that was in navbar.js, and so we want that to happen here, but we haven't called that useCart hook yet, so we need to bring that in. And then we need to call it in our component. And then here we can just call openCart. And let's give some things a bit of space because it's looking a bit cluttered. And then for the big reveal of my magic trick, when we click this, we see the card. Yes! All right, cool. So that's all working. So now we just need to wire up our close. Oh, no, we already did wire up our close. Awesome. So we can click our shopping cart to open. We can click our X to close. And that's looking really good. It does kind of like jump in here, so it just appears, and then when we click the X, it just disappears. So maybe we should add a little bit of a transition to make that a bit smoother. So back in our cart component, so we have this transform property, and that is going from translate x 0 to translate x 100%. And so we can set a transition for this. So we can say we want to transition transform over 0.3 seconds, so 300 milliseconds, and we want the easing curve to be ease in out. And now when we go back to our browser, you see that slides out. That's much nicer. It might be a little bit slow, so maybe we'll say 0.2 seconds. Boop, pew, boop, pew. And maybe we'll change that easing curve from ease in out to just being ease in. So this is just going to ramp up, but it's not going to ramp up and then back down. Whoop, pew, whoop, pew. Okay, sick. Our cart is looking awesome. That's everything that I wanted to cover in this video. In the next video, we're going to look at actually building a checkout page. So where do we go when we actually click this button? I'll see you there.